Among the three of the great ape species that are most often seen in the Planet of the Apes franchise, none have given us more fan-favorite characters than the gorilla. Across all 10 films in the series, we've gotten 10 main and supporting gorilla characters, and I'm here to rank them all from worst to best. If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. Enjoy the video. Hello everybody and welcome to Ape Nation, your #1 source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh and today I am ranking every gorilla character from across the entire Planet of the Apes film franchise. Earlier this month, a fun but kind of ridiculous question went viral online that asked the following: who would win in a fight, 100 men versus 1 gorilla? Which, guys, come on, it's a f***ing gorilla. Regardless, with all of this talk about how strong, how fast, how powerful, seriously, how is this a real question? And overall just how cool of a member of the great apes family gorillas are, I thought it would be fun to take a look at every main and supporting gorilla character in the Apes film franchise, sorry Urco fans, no TV show characters here, and rank all of them from my least favorite to my #1. While the majority of the best and most iconic characters in the franchise tend to be chimpanzees or orangutans, I think there's a good argument to be made that the Planet of the Apes fanbase has always had a real soft spot for gorillas and loves to see them get a chance to shine. So with that said, let's get to ranking, starting with number 10. And coming in at number 10 is going to be Aldo. To anyone who has been following my channel for a long enough time now, this is probably no surprise at all to you, but for those who don't know, I cannot stand this character. He might actually be the all-time worst character in the entirety of the Planet of the Apes franchise to me. Aldo, of course, is the main villain from Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and to me this character just has absolutely no redeeming qualities as a character whatsoever. He's such a thinly written villain with such an aggravating and annoying and grating personality throughout the movie from start to finish. He's not a menacing character, he's not an interesting character, he's not endearing or emotionally compelling in any way whatsoever. There's no arc, and to me he just comes off as such an unintelligent brute that you're rooting for his demise from the very start of the movie, and to me, among many other reasons, is one of the biggest that Battle does not work as a movie, and so for that reason he comes in at number 10. At number 9 on the list, and from the original Planet of the Apes from 1968, is Julius. Honestly, I don't have that much to say about this character. To be honest, I don't really think most people have much to say about this character. He really isn't much of a character at all, but unfortunately he is the only real noteworthy gorilla character in the original Apes movie, but he does serve his purpose. And it is kind of nice to have a gorilla character who treats Zira and the scientists somewhat with respect and decency instead of just looking down on them like all of the rest of the gorilla characters do. He also gets to take part in one of the original film's most iconic scenes, in which Taylor gets sprayed by a hose in his cage. And I will also say he gets one of my favorite lines of comedic dialogue in the entire original series.
That bright eyes is remarkable. He keeps trying to form words.
You know what they say, human see, human do.
And so, for all those reasons, I am putting Julius at number 9. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Winter from War for the Planet of the Apes. Winter is a character who I have always been a little bit conflicted on. On the one hand, it is really cool to have an albino gorilla in this franchise, just in general. He's the only one that there is, and I think it was really fun just visually to get that in the franchise. And also, the CGI on him is some of the best that I have ever seen. Obviously, it doesn't really have much of an impact on who he is as a character or how well written or anything he is, but the design of him and the look of him is just so hyper photoreal. I cannot ever take my eyes off of him anytime he's on screen in War. It's mind-blowing to look at. That being said, he is overall a bit of a weak character, both in terms of his development, which there really isn't much of, and his overall characterization. He just kind of exists to get kidnapped, betray Caesar, and then die, all in the span of about 20 minutes. But ultimately, he does serve his purpose, and he serves it well enough. I just wish he was given more to do. And that is why Winter is at number 8. Up next, at number 7 on this list, is going to be from Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, Krull. Krull, I think, is one of the film's few memorable, if not more likable characters. I actually kind of really enjoy the arc that takes him from this place of complete distrust in humans to allying with them by the end. And while there isn't that much got into it, I do think his backstory is pretty compelling, with his betrayal of Thade and former relationship to Attar and all of that stuff. I think it keeps him somewhat engaging, even again if it isn't utilized or explored much. And similar to Julius, he also has another one of my favorite lines, specifically just when it comes to this movie.
Talking monkeys can't exist.
Monkeys are further down the evolutionary ladder, just above humans.
So for all of those reasons, Krull is going to go at number 7. Coming in at number 6, again from Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, that is going to be Attar. Attar is a character who I've gone back and forth with anytime I watch this movie with how I feel about him, whether I like him or I think he's just okay or I think he's wasted. And right now I'm more towards the positive side. I will say he mostly is just a generic henchman gorilla that doesn't have a whole lot of depth to him, if any at all. That said, and honestly, maybe it isn't completely fair and isn't being totally objective, but hey, it's my list. And the truth is, Attar is played by the late, great Michael Clarke Duncan, who was one of my all-time favorite actors. I love this guy. He has given some of the all-time greatest performances in my opinion, and so I just really have always loved that actor even when I was a kid, and I think he was just tailor-made for this role. The role just feels like it was designed for someone of his authoritative stature, and I think he makes the character so much better and more memorable and more entertaining than he has any right to be. And he takes the character and he makes him fun anytime he's on screen. You're to an extent locked in anytime he shows up in the movie. He's really menacing as a villain, and he proves in the end just how dangerous and ruthless that he can be when he ultimately takes down Krull. And also, I've always thought his armor was really, really cool. So for all of those reasons, I'm putting Attar at number 6. Next up at number 5 is going to be Luca from War for the Planet of the Apes. Now, I know some people might put this character a bit higher. I know he has a lot of love from some fans. I have never been head over heels for this character like some others, but I do think he is very solid and very likable, and to a degree pretty compelling. I also think that he pairs really well with the original trio of Caesar, Maurice, and Rocket, and I think that his sacrifice for Caesar and his final moment with Nova is really emotionally moving, and at that point in the film elevated him a bit by his character's end for me, from someone who I liked to someone who I actually genuinely cared about. I wish it wasn't his death that did that, but ultimately that is what it is. I wish he had been given a bit more time and development similar to Rocket and Maurice to feel as essential to the crew as them, but I still really like the character. I'm very moved by the character, and so for that reason, he's gonna go at number 5. Coming in at number 4 on my list is going to be Sylva from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This is a character who honestly probably would have been a few places lower just a few months ago, but because this is the most recent addition to the franchise, I have watched it quite a bit more recently than some of the others, and the more that I watch this movie, the more I've grown to really like this character. I think he is genuinely scary and really, really menacing anytime that he's on screen, honestly, more so than pretty much any other gorilla villain in this franchise. He just really instills a sense of fear anytime he shows up, and he really makes for a great physical secondary villain. Most of his big scenes are action scenes, but his two biggest action scenes feel genuinely terrifying because of him, and it makes it feel like there are real stakes just because of how he carries himself. And his intro in the movie is also really excellent and sets up one of Kingdom's most interesting ideas when it comes to keeping Caesar's memory alive and what it means and how it's utilized throughout the story.
For Caesar!
I think Sylva is an awesome character, and that is why he's coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3 on my list is General Ursus from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This is another character who, up until just a few months ago, maybe even more recently, I would have had a few notches lower, but I gotta be honest, I've really grown to have a lot more appreciation for this character in more recent times than I ever have before. On the surface, yeah, I do still feel that Ursus is a very one-note villain who is ultimately just a bad guy just to be a bad guy, but it works really well for Beneath because it's the perfect type of villain as a follow-up to Zeus from the first movie. But truthfully, it's James Gregory who elevates this role with such a fun, entertaining, and theatrical performance. He makes him so much more memorable than he has any right to be as a character, making him what I think is one of, if not the most memorable part of Beneath as a whole, which is a large part of why he's grown on me so much. And he also has such an iconography to him that I think is a part of what's made him so beloved by older fans. There's also the specific speech he has in the beginning of the movie. When you get to see James Gregory's performance and his dialogue and how he carries himself and his delivery, it's again theatrical and sinister in a way. And there's a pretty blatant but striking bit of social commentary with the way that Ursus speaks about humans, and to a degree he cements himself as a more extremist and physically driven version of Zeus, and it sticks with this character throughout the rest of the movie.
I don't say all humans are evil simply because their skin is white. No. But our great lawgiver tells us that never will the human have the ape's divine faculty for being able to distinguish between evil and good. The only good human is a dead human.
I don't think the character ever quite hits the heights of the depth that comes from that speech, but I do think we get close at times, and I also think he has a really great character design. I've always really liked his helmet, the overall aesthetic, the look, that over-the-top theatricality of him all and how he's put together. So for all of those reasons, I've grown to really admire the character of General Ursus. He makes Beneath a much more fun movie than I think it is ultimately at its core, and for that reason, I have him at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Red, aka Donkey from War for the Planet of the Apes. This is a character who I think is genuinely one of the most underrated in the entire franchise, gorilla or otherwise. Not quite as underrated as another character I'm going to talk about, but still definitely one of them. I think what we get from this character in War is really fascinating and a really compelling character by nature of just who he is and why he's working with the humans. He has a really interesting and complex relationship with Caesar. Obviously, they're not allies, but they aren't necessarily enemies either, and they're in this weird, interesting middle ground that you get to see go back and forth throughout the movie anytime they have an interaction together. And it creates a character that's very easy to dislike and be angry towards at first, but he keeps you rooting for him to redeem himself throughout the entire movie, and he ultimately does redeem himself at the end when he saves Caesar's life and gets himself killed in the process. And the character's existence as a whole, along with other characters like him, addresses the fallout of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes' ending and Koba's actions in that movie just through the character's actions and his perspective. And it has a really strong and emotionally satisfying arc overall. And so I really love this character. He's one of my favorite parts of War. He's one of the reasons I love War. I think he's one of, if not the most underrated aspect of War for the Planet of the Apes. And so for all of those reasons, Red, aka Donkey, whatever you want to call him, is coming in at number 2 on this list.
His war is madness. It won't save him any more than it will save you.
I save myself.
Is there anything left of you to save?
And finally, number 1 on my list, and this is not a surprise to anybody who either knows the franchise well enough to know who's missing or has listened to me talk about this character multiple times at this point, but my number 1 favorite gorilla in the entire Planet of the Apes franchise is always and forever will be Buck from Rise of the Planet of the Apes. In my opinion, Buck is the single most underrated, underappreciated, undervalued character in the entirety of the Planet of the Apes franchise. I love this character, and the fact that I love him so much and he doesn't have a single line of dialogue at all just speaks to how well done he is, how well fleshed out he is, how well utilized he is, and how incredibly likable and instantly compelling he is in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. He instantly compels you to root for him just from his position and his perspective perspective of being someone who is locked in a cage, and Caesar's kindness towards him and his loyalty and allyship and kindness towards Caesar in return is what immediately gets you to care about and root for him and be compelled by him even further beyond that. That loyalty and reliability to Caesar and just all of his fellow apes in the ape sanctuary in Rise, seeing his friendship with Caesar and his growth into one of the leaders of the apes is a really moving and enjoyable arc to see play out in Rise. It's one of my favorite aspects of Rise, and it's one of the least talked about parts of Rise, seeing where he goes when we first are introduced to him being one of the 4 leaders of the apes by the end. And it just makes his sacrifice for Caesar and his death one of the most emotional moments in the entire Caesar trilogy for me. Just because of how much I care about that character by that point in the story and what his sacrifice means for Caesar, what his sacrifice means for ape kind, what it means for the story, and just the fact that he is someone who is willing to do that. He's willing to lay his life on the line for his leader, for his friend, and for his fellow apes. It's an emotional, sad, tragic payoff to what I think is a really beautifully done character who has a really fun to watch and easy to root for arc that is emotionally engaging all the way through. I love this character. He is one of the best parts of the Caesar trilogy. He is one of my favorite things that has come out of Planet of the Apes in the last 15 years. He doesn't get talked nearly enough about. He doesn't get as much praise as I think he deserves to. And that is why, to me, Buck is, without question, the #1 gorilla in the Planet of the Apes franchise. But that is just my opinion. That's just my ranking of the gorillas in the franchise, at least on the film side of things. I want to know what you guys think of my ranking. Do you agree with most of it, some of it, or am I completely off here? Either way, I want to hear how you guys rank the gorillas in the franchise and which ones are your favorites, so be sure to leave all of your thoughts down below in the comments. Thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button. You can also join the Ape Nation Discord server for daily discussions about the franchise, and if you're interested in seeing more of my videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.